Acting Immigration and Customs Enforcement Director. John Sandweg with us this morning. Thank you for your time. Is it a crisis? Is it not a crisis? Are we spending too much time on the rhetoric and the words around it rather than focusing on the real issue? And I guess the bigger question of that is, has it begun to be a political talking point, what we're seeing at the border?
Well, I think the answer to all your questions is yes. Certainly there's a crisis at the border. We've had a mass migration that really began in 2016, maybe even a little farther back than that, and we haven't been able to stop, as the numbers demonstrate. Really unprecedented flows of people coming to the United States. Unfortunately, the rhetoric in Washington has only increased. As always, the border is a political football. We don't find bipartisan solutions. I think each party seeks political gain from the border. And really, as a result, we don't address the problem. Look, the fundamental issue here is this: the threat at the border is dynamic. There are multiple different types of threats, and the situation changes very quickly. Unfortunately, Congress has really, continues to look for these simple solutions and the political rhetoric rather than attempting to get at the root of the problem and address the current threats we face today and anticipate the threats we're going to face in the future.
Well, as we see this influx, I wonder, have the motivations for migrants changed? Is there something that's different?
The simple truth is this, that we have an asylum system. We have asylum laws that have been in the books for over 50 years in this country. What we have not done is adequately fund the asylum system. And the migrants and really the smuggling groups that are recruiting, you have to understand, none of these migrants are showing up on accident. They're all recruited by smugglers. The migrants themselves are just desperate to find a better life. And the smugglers go out and take advantage of that and exploit them by recruiting them in their home countries, bring them to the border. But what they realize, and what's changed, to answer your question, is they've realized that we have not funded the asylum system, and that if you get to this country and you make a claim of asylum, it'll be years before we can process the claim. And so they're exploiting that by coming up and making the claim, and that gets them at least 3, 4, 5 years in the United States. And obviously, once people realize that, more are going to come, and the problem becomes worse. The frustrating thing to me is that Congress and frankly, multiple administrations have not surged resources into the asylum system so that we can make that no longer true, that once you make an asylum claim, you should be able to make your claim. You should be able to be given all the due process in the world. If you have a legitimate claim, you should be allowed to stay in this country because that's who we are as a country. We provide safe haven to people fleeing persecution. But if you don't have a claim, that should be determined very quickly, and then you should be removed from the U.S. Unless and until we can do that, I think you're going to continue to see this mass migration, and the crisis will go unabated.
We've seen a lot of Republican senators and House members travel to the border recently. Are those visits helpful?
Look, I think a bipartisan visit like this is always helpful. But these have been going on for years. And during my time at DHS and at ICE, there were multiple bipartisan delegations that said all the right things, that I think genuinely learned the answers from the career, Homeland Security, Border Patrol and Customs officers, ICE officers who worked that border. It doesn't seem to ever change anything, though. The politics and the political polls here in Washington are just too great, where no real solutions get solved. So that's what's frustrating to me. But yes, of course, it is very helpful for them to see on the ground what is going on. Now, what we need to see is some action, and that we start resourcing the border, and resourcing the current threats we face today. We don't need simple solutions like walls. But we also can't put our head in the sand and say there's not a problem. We need to surge resources to handle the flow of people, and that itself will diminish the flow itself.
So what are some simple examples of things that you think would be helpful to address the flow right now?
Well, again, look, the asylum system, when a person comes to this country under existing law, now some folks say, let's change the law. That's just not politically feasible. So when people get 2 feet on American soil, even if it's right just on the other side of the border, these people, I think it's important for the viewers to understand, they're not trying to sneak into the country. That's what we saw for decades throughout the 90s, the early 2000s, throughout when I was at DHS in 2012 and 2014, that was a big part of our problem. Today, they just get their feet on the American soil and say, I want asylum. But we haven't so what that triggers is a process where asylum officers review the case and immigration judges hear the case. We have not anywhere near increased the number of asylum officers or judges to meet the millions of people who are coming to this country claiming asylum. And all that does is create more backlogs and encourage more people to come. So we need to address that problem first. At the same time, we can't take our eye off the ball on things like drug trafficking, where that requires completely different resources.
Let me ask you this, because we're putting a lot of faith in our lawmakers on both sides to come up with solutions, and you've been on the front lines to watch it. But what can the American public do, whether you live in a border town or not? Because we've seen that the flow crosses into all sectors of our society, big and small communities, even in middle America. What actionable things would you suggest to people who are watching at home to take a step to help be part of the solution? I mean, what does that even look like?
I really wish I had a better answer other than to push their congressman, push their senator to come to work, reach across the aisle and come up with a comprehensive solution. You have to understand that this is a system, right? What you do on visas, what you do in terms of work opportunities in the U.S., all of these people are coming here for a reason. The primary reason is economic, right? For more than 90% of these people are coming here to get a job. And so there is a demand too. There are American employers who are hiring these people. So why don't we look, I mean, it sounds like a cliche in here in Washington, but you do need a comprehensive approach. We need to look at how can we reform the work visa system to allow these people to come here lawfully and maybe seasonally, where they can go back home and spend the holidays with their families. What resources do we need to make at the border to stop illegal incursions, drug trafficking? At the same time, what resources do we need to surge into the asylum system?
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.